All right, this is all about parenthetical documentation, and basically that allows you to be a pirate, everybody. You get to steal information from a lot of different sources, and you're not a plagiarist, you're not a pirate, you're actually a researcher, because you're going to say where this information came from that you're using in your research paper. That's the whole point of it. And it looks like, if you look at the middle bullet there where it says Davidson 12, that's an example of what parenthetical documentation looks like. It's an author's last name and the page number, and you put that after every piece of information in your research paper that did not come from your own head. So if you're citing a direct quote, of course you say where it came from. If you're paraphrasing an idea, you say where it came from. Anything that you didn't come up with, you have to say where it came from, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Basically, let's say we have an information card here about Jimi Hendrix's showmanship. This is a note card, and he burned his guitar to outperform Pete Townsend of The Who had smashed his guitar earlier in the day. Now that piece of information we know came from a source, and it's a source, it's a very long title of an article in an online newspaper about Jimi Hendrix's guitar selling, but that's where I got that information. So on the left there is a note card, on the right is a source card. Now, if there's no author listed, such as this one, then look at this example. It says, when he set his guitar on fire, Hendrix was trying to outperform Pete Townsend, who had smashed his guitar on the stage earlier in the day. And in parentheses, I have, hey, in quotation marks. Well, that actually, let's go back to the previous slide. If you look at that, it says, Hey Doe, Jimi Hendrix's favorite guitar. That's the title of that article, and the first word in that is hey. And so now in this citation, we're going to say, hey, and that just tells us that's the title of that article. Now, if this article had been signed, if there's an actual author to it, we would use that author's last name. But a lot of web pages and things like that, you're not necessarily going to know who the author is, so you'll do it by the first word of the title that you would alphabetize it by. Here's some other basic documentation, though. If you do have a book, like Marquerie 153, so that's the author's last name and the page number. If you have two authors, you just use an and between their last names, Winterhout and Murray 278. And if there are three or more authors, you use the phrase et al. Now that's a Latin phrase, and it means and everybody else. So that's Kells and everybody else, page 49. Now, as far as how to punctuate it, let's look at these examples. So the first example, it says, be sure to put the citation inside the sentence to the left of the period. And there's an example, Jones and McCord, page 26, and then the period. So that's part of that sentence. Now, if you're quoting, be sure that the citation is not part of the quote itself. So see how the citation by Mr. Schwa, it's outside of the quote, and then there's the period. Now, if you are citing a site where there's no listed author or an article or web page, then that goes in quotation marks, and then the period still goes outside of the parentheses, and you would italicize the citation if it is something that you would normally italicize, such as the title of a movie, like Jaws. Now, when you're writing your research paper, if you use a source more than once, here's what you can get away with. You see in this example, this is a paragraph from a research paper, and the author's last name was Perry, and it's page 25. But if the next fact that you have is from the same source, also from Perry, you can just put 110. And then there's another one that says 110, and then at the bottom of it you see 111. That's all from Perry. Now you can do that only if it's within the same paragraph. If you have a new paragraph and it's still from Perry, the first time you need to mention Perry and the new page number. But you can keep using that same, it'll be assumed if you have a number that it is the same last name that you had used previously. If you have more than one source by one author, sometimes that happens. You've got one researcher who's published a lot of things about your topic. And in this case, we're going to say this author's name is Krebs, and he did a book called How to Play Rock Guitar, and then he also has an article entitled The Fire of Jimi Hendrix. And so the way you'd cite it here in this example at the top of this, Jimi Hendrix is known for his touch-tone and techniques on guitar. Krebs, comma, how 13. So that tells us it's from his book, How to Play Rock Guitar. And then as much for his incendiary showmanship, that comes from an article called Fire. So if the author has more than one work in your works cited page, then you need to specify which of those works by that author it's coming from. Please also note that citations can occur in the middle of a sentence. You don't have to put it at the very end of a sentence. Right there in the middle, you can have a whole list of things in one sentence, and each one having a different citation. So remember, kids, if you cite your sources well, it gives you credibility and it makes you awesome.